I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, June 27th, 2022. It's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. I hope wherever you are, it's a beautiful, wonderful, productive day for you as well. Mondays, we collaborate with our friends at Hawthorne Neighborhood Council and other neighborhood organizations to do what I call practice governance at the neighborhood level. The idea is that what we do in our, coffee shops and neighborhood centers and online is how we really build community and how we really participate in shaping the structures, the futures, the responses in our community to challenges and opportunities. So we've been doing this for a while. My thanks to my colleague and friend and partner, Diana Hawkins at Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. Diana, thank you so much. How you doing?
Thanks, Al. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here on another Monday. Like I said earlier, there was a lot of festivities going on this weekend, so I'm glad to see people are getting back out and gathering. And hopefully, we'll have a peaceful summer.
Great, great. And also thanks to my friend and colleague, Brenda Lyle Gray, who's joining us as always from New Mexico. Brenda, you said it's cool down there, huh?
It is, and like I said, tomorrow it might be 90. That you just have to hang with it. Leave your winter clothes out.
Well, listen, guys, today we have guests from the University of Minnesota School of Architecture, and they're here to talk about investing in North Minneapolis. It's a program, a project that is inviting the community to join what's called the Community Liaison Group. Here representing that is Julia Robinson and also Timothy Griffin. Timothy is with the Minnesota Design Center, Julia with the School of Architecture. And the idea is that a project that was once known as Reimagining North Minneapolis looks at the corridor of 26th Avenue North. That avenue goes from Worth Park at the top of the hill all the way down to the Mississippi River. It's a wonderful drive or walk or a pathway. And the question is, how do we imagine the best and highest use of that corridor for supporting transit and livability needs of the community? The project Investing in North Minneapolis wants to get all of us in a conversation. So we're pleased to have the conveners of that, partners in it, on the program today. So I'm going to start with Julie Robinson. Julie, first of all, welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to see you here.
Thank you.
So give us Investing in North Minneapolis 101. How do we start thinking about and looking at where we are, what brought us here to this conversation?
Well, the first thing we wanted to do. Well, I'm the project that we're doing is trying to engage seeking to engage the community in this new vision. And so we really feel that it should start from the community, not from the city. And so we're leveraging a design class at the university to be working with the community on the design. And so, or the first thing we want to do is find out what the community is interested in doing. So we will do a project where we're going to have some common co-design events. We're going to have the community members who will sit in on the class and work with the students on the design. We're going to have young people, youth, come in and every Wednesday into the class and bring their ideas into the design. So that is, in a nutshell, I guess what I would say. Maybe Tim wants to say more about it. And then I do have a little PowerPoint, but sure. I don't know how to share it. Here, I see share down here at the bottom.
Yeah, there's a button at the bottom of your screen that says share. Okay, and if you click that, it'll give you some options, either share a screen or share a Chrome tab. And if your PowerPoint is on a separate Chrome tab, you can share it that way or share your screen either way.
Okay.
And we're flexible and patient enough so we can hang out till you get it.
That's the wrong thing. I don't.
Yeah.
Let's see. How do I? I don't know how to choose it. In my normal thing, you see all the things that are available. Maybe I have to have it at the top of the screen. Maybe that's it. Let's try that.
Yeah, or have it at a how to choose the screen to share. You mean, or what? Or
yes. Right.
Yeah.
Share screen.
And it should give you a choice of screens to share.
Let's see.
One of them should be your PowerPoint.
Huh. It's not showing that.
You might need to make her a co-host, Al, so she can share.
No, I think it's open for anybody in StreamYard.
Well, it's only showing this screen. I can't seem to get it to share, to look at any others.
How about sending the PowerPoint to me, and I'll share it. That's easy.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, you have the email still, mcfarlanemedia@gmail.com.
Okay.
Yes, Al, did you get the file that I sent you?
I got it.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that
the airwaves will work.
Maybe you want to, Al, why don't you share that for the moment? Why don't you share the file that Tim sent, and I'll get the PowerPoint going.
Sure. Okay. I'll do that. Just a second. Yeah. Let me give me a second now. Okay, I'm going to share that right now. Okay, there we go. And Tim, can you see it? Read it?
I can see it.
Okay. You want to walk us through that?
Sure. Let's see.
Can you make it a little bit bigger, Al, please?
I was getting ready to ask
Let's see if I can. Is that any bigger?
Kind of hard to read. There you go.
Okay.
But bring it down a little bit. There you go.
Okay.
I think that'll work.
Tell me when to scroll down. I'll scroll down.
Okay.
Okay. So as you introduced this today, Mr. McFarlane, the idea of 26th Avenue North has been around as a way of connecting the Worth Parkway amenities on the west to the Mississippi River front on the east, and it has been one of our colleagues, Jamil Ford, with Mobilized Design Architects, has been talking about this. As you can see, as Al has scrolled down here, that's approximately where 26th Avenue North crosses North Minneapolis, and it is south of Lowry and north of Broadway, and Broadway angles through. Your audience may be familiar with the River First project that introduced the idea of how Minneapolis neighborhoods can reconnect to the riverfront in above the falls up to the northern boundaries of the city. And in fact, Farview Park was identified as one of the main connection points right on 26th Avenue. More recently, and I hope some people have taken the walk. It's being advertised in the Minneapolis Parks Foundation website, and really walking from Farview Park down to the new 26th Avenue overlook and sculpture by Formula Architects, James Garrett at Formula Architects and his team. And really, it's literally putting a stake in the ground for the community connecting to the riverfront there. And so that's the 26th Avenue North is the framework for the studio. Julia will talk more about that. It will probably run for 3 or 4 years, and each year approximately 12 students will get to know the residents in the community and listen to ideas and thoughts and illustrate projects that can support and reinforce that connection. Now, the projects may be additional parks and and gardens and such. Michael Cheney with Project Sweetie Pie has been a big advisor to the group and his work with the Celestial Garden Project. Also, different amenities along the way, probably including benches for the hill from Lindale down to the riverfront for people to rest along the way. And then the architectural side of this is both additional park and school facilities, but also housing developments and other kinds of investment in the community that can make this a real focal point. I think I'll stop there.
So maybe did you get my email? I don't know. I'm having
Let
trouble.
me stop sharing on this brochure for right now and check my email, and I'll see if I have that. And if I do, I'll load it up. Let's see.
I'm having
Yep,
trouble.
I have it here.
Oh, great. Okay.
So I'm gonna open it up, and let me share that. Just 1 second. Share. Let's share this one. And let me make this larger as well.
So maybe you can show it as a slideshow if you want, but maybe. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So this is the project, of course, and this
And
is
you can
our.
just tell me when to move it. Maybe you can you move it? I'm not sure if you can or not. Probably
No.
not.
No.
Okay, just let me know when to move it.
So this is our logo that we just worked on with some community members, and it's showing the idea of connecting Theodore Wirth Park to the river, and people actually being the center of the activity. So that's the first thing. So let's go on to the next slide.
Okay.
Nice logo.
Thank you. Glad you like it. So we'll talk about the project purpose, the team, and the community liaison group that we're interested in having the Hawthorne Area Community Council participate and other neighborhood groups. So the project purpose, let's keep going, please. So we have 4 project purposes. One is to educate future designers and planners that listen to the community. Another is to engage the community to vision their future, which we've talked about. The third is to leverage the architecture student talent so that the community's ideas are represented in the plans in a professional way. The students that we're going to be doing it this year in their final year of their professional program. And then the last idea, although maybe it really should be first, is that we see that the importance of the community proactively leading the process and communicating direction to the city rather than the city developing a plan and then getting a response from the community. That's sort of the key idea. And I think Tim already showed this project site. Did you show this earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we can go on to the next. Thank you. And this is kind of small, but it shows that where the project, this is the first year of the project. Well, actually, it's the second year, but this is the schedule for this year. So we're finishing up. We want the community liaison groups to meet a couple of times before the semester starts in the fall. And our research team is meeting at the same time. And then the design class will happen during all these activities that are involved with this investing project with the community will happen during the fall semester, which is the months of September, October, November, and the first part of December. Mm-hmm. And then what we'll do is what we did last year is we will have make an exhibition of the student work, and show it in the community. Right now, it's actually being shown at North Commons Park. So, and then as well, why don't we keep going here to the next slide?
Where is it being shown in North Commons? In the North Commons building? Or?
In the recreation building.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is a project. This is to show that we're looking at a grant where we're going to be looking at 2 years worth of the same project being repeated. Go on to the next slide, please. And the team, why don't we go on to the next and we'll see. Oh my goodness, the names got left off somehow. But there's Julia Robinson, me, Savannah Steele, who is an architect with HGA and is all going to be co-teaching the university class with me. And Jamil, then I see what happened. They sort of got shifted around. So Jamil Ford, who is a mobilized design architecture is one of our instigators. And Michael Cheney joined this year because we really got excited about working with the community gardens and seeing the green project really represented as in terms of food and young people. And so he's participating this year, and you recognize Tim Griffin.
Mhm.
And then if we look at the larger picture, we have, in addition to the project team, we have then the community members, and we have here a picture of the community members who participated in the fall of 2019. And what we're going to, those people will, the community will participate in these common co-design events, which we'll have on 2 Saturdays, which are design events where we're going to be first showing the community some of the research about what's going on in the community, and getting feedback on what you think is important to design, and what parts of the community really need to be focused on, and what changes need to be made, and what kinds of things need to be added to the community. So that's the common co-design events. And then we'll have some community members participating in class. And here we have the second image on the right in the green background. Is last year we had it at UROC, and the community members, we weren't able to do it in person. So
Right.
we did have the youth come in person. And so we're having in-class community reviews. And then the last thing is that we'll have students interviewing community members. So we have the community youth then will be participating. We're working with environmental initiatives to have some young people come every Wednesday participating with the class. And then youth beyond that group will participate in the common co-design events as we can engage with them. And then the University of Minnesota students, of course, will come to class, and they'll present materials at the common co-design events, and they'll interview community members. And then we have the community liaison group, which is the group of organizations in the neighborhood that we are inviting to participate in the project. And so we'd like to have some team members participate in our meetings to plan the events. And we would like to have some people participate in the class reviews, and also be co-hosts, organizations to co-host these common co-design events. And then also organizations, if they aren't able to contribute in other ways, we'd be delighted if they could spread the word about the project to their network. So then the community liaison event, we talked about this. We went over this maybe we'll just go over it one more time. So the participation then from these organizations will be this co-hosting, naming representatives to the committee if they want to participate in that way, recommending participants for the participants in the class to help the students review their work, for spreading the word to their networks, and then assisting in finding resources for activities is also another thing that we don't have. We were hoping to have money for stipends for neighborhood participants, but at the moment we haven't been able to raise the funds. So hopefully we can do that and pay people to participate. And then this is the final slide, which shows last year's student design work. This is an image of the exhibition that is at the North Commons Park. And then this on the right, Tim did some research after we did the project to see how it went. And maybe you want to talk about this, Tim.
Sure, certainly. I'll just very quickly. So there were, as you can see in the exhibit, there were 11 projects. And what my research was reaching out to 6 people from the community group who participated in the process, and wanted to understand their role in the community as they expressed it. It was really very interesting. I wanted them to describe how well they felt the students listened to the concerns that were raised and ideas that were raised. And that diagram, actually, the quotes on the right of that diagram are direct quotes from the interviews. The participants are anonymous, but the quotes are the actual transcript of the interviews. But for example, there was a lot of debate around the scale of housing that was being proposed and built in the neighborhood. And several people actually, but a person expressed that they didn't want to live next to these developments. They liked the character of the North Minneapolis area, the flats and bungalows that make up most of the housing. There was also a lot of talk about additional services and facilities, through the schools. There was a project, a school resource center that was proposed for one of the middle schools. There's a lot of discussion about food production. Mike, this is kind of where Michael Cheney came in and wanted to really make sure that from community gardens up through production and distribution, that could become part of the North Minneapolis community. Just a couple more, but the idea of a Riverside Community Center was articulated by a number of people, and it sort of joins the family, I suppose, of institutions on the riverfront, the Guthrie, other museums and things that are located on the riverfront, and a real desire and pride in North Minneapolis to have a kind of community gathering spot there as well. And a lot of discussion and illustration about the Fairview connection. How do you get from Fairview Park, Fairview Park to the riverfront, and bringing forward the idea of various bridges and lidding of the expressway to make that connection similar to other connections around the I-94 rebuild. So I think I'll stop with that. But those are you can see some of the quotes that folks made, and kind of connecting them to some of the projects that were proposed.
A little bit hard to read, but
yeah.
Well, I can read them here. They're very interesting. I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to imagine in my head now. 26th Street, does it actually go straight to the river? It does, doesn't it? Or
yes, it goes right down to the river, and it ends in the overlook, the new overlook.
It crosses the bridge. It crosses the.
It doesn't cross the river. Doesn't cross the river.
It crosses the freeway.
Yes.
Crosses the freeway, exactly.
Right above West Broadway, I guess. Right.
Precisely.
I'm trying to picture it in my mind, because there's an on-ramp for going north off of Washington Avenue, just below 26th, right? So
right.
that bridge is the one there that's crossing from Lendale over to Washington and then onto the river. Okay. I'm trying to get a picture of it in my mind, and I see it now. So question number one, how do the university and the design center come to this project? The language I'm reading says you want to get this to be not just a city project, but one that the city engages, involves, and values the input of residents. And so it seems like the design is ultimately a city project, not a university project, not a community design center project. So how does that relationship emerge? How do you all become players in this?
Well, we see this project as informing the city. So it's a pre-design. It's before the city designs, giving them the information about what the community wants, so that they're responding to the community instead of designing something that's not responding to the community and then getting the community to respond later. So the idea is to generate the ideas from the start, from the community.
So the genesis of the relationship, though, is community approaches the
right.
School of
So
Architecture.
the city will have. There will be people who are going to be from the city that will serve as reviewers on the project and be informed about the project. But we don't see that as the primary. They're not the source of the ideas. They're the responders to the ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that there are two things we also had in mind. We wanted to make sure that we're talking about something that would be implemented in, longer, 3 to 5 years would be implemented, but that also we would like to have as a part of this some small designs that could be implemented perhaps by some of the youth in the summer. Things like changing a street sign or, well, I'm not sure exactly what, because the students have to design that, but those are the kinds of things, something that could be implemented easily to show that we're actually interested in making change. It's not just we don't want it to just be an exercise in talking about what we should do, but we want to have it really understandable and to show that it really actually will take place if we do it right.
So absent the engagement of the School of Architecture and the Community Design Center and the partnerships you're creating with neighborhood stakeholders, what would happen in the natural, quote unquote, development of 26th Avenue? Would it be, is it envisioned as a connective between the river and the park, or are those simply things that are incidental, coincidental, and not part of any planning or development? I mean, the question is,
There are some groups that, and I think, Tim, you know which groups are actually involved in considering this as a project. I think that maybe we want
I think maybe, Al, to back up a little bit on your question,
sure.
I think all of us could speculate about what the current trends would be, and I think you've started to lay them out. There would be various investments that have been made, the bike lanes that have been put in, the new overlook, and over time those will continue to happen. I think what Julia is suggesting, what we're suggesting, is that a lot of times the community point of view doesn't really get illustrated perhaps as much as the city point of view or a developer's point of view, or even community institutions and organizations. And so these exhibits that are produced, as this table suggests, are some thought out ideas of how both what people are saying, and then what those could look like, and what are the kind of the programmatic components, and then a way of, as you know, the city puts out requests for proposals, and so this information for development can inform proposals for both private projects, the development projects. Many of them are the residential ones that you're hearing about, and then also for community investment. And there's a big push, I think, to recognize the inequity in public improvements in North Minneapolis, and so this can contribute to that conversation and begin to illustrate things that the students heard in over the course of a semester, and then they put, well, I guess I don't know if they put pen to paper anymore. I think they put stylus to computers, but yeah, they would. You have an exhibit of this as a possible future, and it's important also. Julia mentioned the research that's been done. Early in the semester, the students are tasked with looking at examples from good examples from Minneapolis, from the Twin Cities, in all of these categories, and also internationally, in terms of what people are thinking about, and bringing those to the table for discussion and consideration. So at the end of each semester, the community members who participate and the students have a kind of a bond over this conversation. And if these repeat over time, it creates a pretty rich catalog of ideas for North Minneapolis.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. And so help me understand the linkage. You mentioned in your first presentation, Tim, that this project connects with at least two more projects north of it, right? One above Lowry Avenue, and I'm presuming it also connects with the North Harbor, or is it North Terminal? What's it called?
Upper Harbor.
Upper Harbor Terminal and the North Loop.
And North Loop. So how do all of those flow together, and how does this see itself ensuring that this corridor is an integrated unit within that development? I think there's been a general North Minneapolis development plan, some years standing. I remember seeing it, but does this all tie into that?
Yes, it ties into that, but we are a little bit critical of some of the things that we feel that that maybe there should be. Well, I guess if the park board can get that connection, that's one of the things that we feel is very important, is having the continuation of the park system along the river and the bicycle paths. And so we're advocating for that, and the designs will represent those ideas as if they are already alive and well. And so the thing we're trying to build on the things that we think are productive, and what the community thinks are productive, because some of the things the community is not so excited about, and other things they are.
Mhm.
So we want to represent the ideas that what the community, how they critique what is the present plans.
Is there any way you can share some of the dislikes from the community with us?
Well, before you do, here's one that struck me that I think is telling, and that's item number 3, where it says a school resource center. And the quote, interview quote was, after school programs before bike lanes. That is loaded. That is loaded, loaded, loaded. It's called Regentrification 101. It's a critique. And what I read and take from that is, before you make life comfortable and easy for white people who use biking for leisure and their convenience, and who have the power to change traffic patterns and change everything for their convenience, what about what our children need to have sustainable and effective learning? And so I love that you chose that quote. And how am I right in reading it, interpreting it, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think you're right.
It's a very small it's a very small cell on a table, so you're right, there's a lot behind that. And I just tried to one of the things that I appreciate about doing interviews is that people have a way of phrasing the point, right? It's not how I would explain it, it's how they feel about it and explain it. So I thought, I think they all have their own kind of quality. Are there others there that come to mind, Al?
Well, that jumped out the most as that's a protest. And
Well, also,
it's a
then I don't
resistance.
want to live next to a high rise is another one.
Well, that one's different too. I mean, and so number one, that one is a resistance from my point of view. That's a resistance statement. But the high rise jumped out to me as well. And that's classic NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's okay somewhere, but not here. And that could come from, a legacy resident. It could come from a new resident. It could come from anywhere. But it's consistent with this idea that okay for them, but not for me. And it does not embrace the idea that we need more of us to build with intentionality a future that supports more of us. So that's of interest to me, how this feeling of otherness still prevails, and it could be even people who are Black people or brown people or legacy residents who saying, not in my backyard because I don't want the headache either. And that's what we normally accuse white people of doing, in keeping us out. But we have the same hesitations and reservations. It's human. Yeah, it really is. So it's a good statement. I like the statement, we should be supporting Black business development. And I think that, that has to be a common refrain throughout North Minneapolis, because if we don't say it, it won't happen. If we don't keep projecting it, it'll be business as usual, and that will be the exclusion of entrepreneurship, or dampening or the ignoring of entrepreneurship opportunities in the Black community. And I was looking for an opportunity to dream big. I love that. I think it's great. I think that one stands as a balance to I don't want to live next door to a high rise. It's kind of natural there, but that's cool. Develop public art and get youth involved. I think that's great. That's a must. Mental health, to have that discussion come up is awesome. I think these are just great quotes, and I'm sure that all of them were just, distillations of a lot of energy, a lot of experience, a lot of fears, but a lot of hopes. And I want to say how wonderful it is that you all have organized yourselves to be intentional and proactive in mining the thoughts and feelings of existing residents of the community, because too often, I think you would agree, their voices have been ignored and nobody's thought about it, and nobody has felt the need to think about it. Development driven by planners and or developers, businesses, and the business sees a vacant lot, a vacant corner, 4 or 5 houses that are on the market that can be converted, and that business then drives the policy of the city, and that is kind of irrespective of the sense of community. It does allow, I think, by code, people that are immediately impacted to either support or not support an idea for development. But by and large, if a developer has her or his strategy together, it's going to happen without the advice and input of the broader community to have a process that you have created that invites and continues to till for engagement in the community is a good thing from my point of view.
Well, that's why it's a longer term project. Usually with the planning process, it's kind of rushed, and we felt that was really a problem, because these ideas take a while to percolate. They don't just come out all perfect at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be developed.
Mm-hmm. So, what other communities do you point students to as models for the process for engagement, or how much innovation is taking place right here with this project?
Tim, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to go ahead?
Sure, I can start. I can start with that. This conversation in North Minneapolis, the design center has been kind of involved in the metropolitan area and rural Minnesota, asking these same kinds of questions. We would invite everybody to kind of open the lid on that conversation. Tom Fisher, who's the director of the Minnesota Design Center, is one of the founders of the International Geodesign Collaboration, and it's over 200 universities around the world asking these same questions and sharing ideas. So we don't want to create a curriculum in the community. We're doing that research to support these ideas and bring the ideas to the table. We want to create a relationship in the community where they feel comfortable looking at ideas and asking the city and asking developers, have you thought about this? Have you thought about housing projects in Amsterdam? Have you thought about what's being done in Northfield, Minnesota? Or there's an example here from Fargo, or so on and so forth. So, and even I think just this time of the I-94 corridor being rebuilt, the Design Center has been active with the Reconnect Rondo organization. Reconnect is a word that comes up quite a bit. It's looking at amenities that are there, neighborhoods, the riverfront, and it's actually our logo, Worth Parkway and the river. And so we're talking about reconnecting the North Side neighborhoods to those amenities. Ironically, the challenge you'll get is that competing interests around parks that are developed. Minneapolis has such a great park system. A lot of neighborhoods consider those parks on the parkway and the riverfront their neighborhood parks, and they're theirs. There's a lot of strong sense of ownership, but that's a good problem to have. How do you share your parks with the overall system? But how do you feel welcome and connected and invested in that park? Kind of a pride of ownership. So it's complicated. We're as academics, we're always criticized of maybe bringing too much information to the table. So please keep us in check with that. But rest assured, there's a lot of data, but there's also conversations that have to happen in terms of developing a community point of view. And
we want the community point of view to be informed by the research. I think that's one of the things that makes it valid for people to listen to, is when the community understands why things are the way they are and why they can change, how they could change. And so we want that to be a part of this process.
Where else on the river are your organizations involved? Are you involved around the university, around the south end of the river, towards
on the board? Before I joined the design center, I was the director of the the St. Paul Design Center at the St. Paul Riverfront Corporation, and that was all about the 4 square miles in between the High Bridge and the Highway 52 bridge, reconnecting that to the riverfront in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. The Great River Passage is the continuation of that up north or throughout the rest of St. Paul. And then the River First Initiative, which I was also involved in, been around for a while, but the River First Initiative was one that talked about reconnecting the riverfront neighborhoods through the industrial areas to the park. And that's why I think the 26th Avenue overlook is such an important project. Is you go down there and you're in the middle of that industrial site, right? And you've got this kind of also this kind of magnificent spike coming out, and you say, what's going on here? And that's really what it's about, is having people say, hey, there's a different way this area can be used. And as you said, in terms of more affluent and white areas, that's how the riverfront is used. And in black neighborhoods, it frequently is used the way it is currently. So I think from an equity point of view, it's the same water in the river, but the banks are very different. So I think part of the power of architecture and urban design is to be able to illustrate those opportunities, both point out the discrepancies, right, with data, health mm-hmm. data, economic data, community wealth, all of the things that we're unpacking in terms of redlining and generational impacts of why we are where we are today. And so this displays it. I mean, we display that data, and then we say, okay, from a retribution point of view, what is owed to the north side in terms of investment and connections. And we're not going to say what that is. That's why we're doing these over the course of 3 or 4 months. We'll have another batch of ideas, and people can use those.
Julia, go ahead. You're going to say something?
I was just going to say that that when you look at the river and you look at what's happening on the river, this area between the North Loop and the Upper Harbor Terminal is still undeveloped, and it's very raw, and it isn't a place where people want to gather yet. And so we want to make sure that end of the 26th Avenue is really the neighborhood's area. It's where representing what the North Minneapolis thinks it should be. What can we do to make that a good representative, so people see the North Minneapolis area along the river as beautiful and as some place to go that we treasure.
Is there a best practices model in Twin Cities along the river? Is there somewhere we can say we want the 26th Street project to look like, act like, be like, but only better because we've taken the time to examine, to explore, and to debate? Is there something that people
I think it's going to be different, but I guess I would say maybe the North Loop area where you have the park coming along and then residences along the edge would be a goal, except I do think that people want to have some businesses, that there is some interest in keeping some of the business that isn't polluting and that isn't detracting from the river. Tim, maybe you have some thoughts about that.
Are there models in other cities that you all have visited or examined in one way or another that you think represent innovation and represent the best practices, what could happen? And I'm particularly interested in how you address the question of race. What's unique about, in my point of view, North Minneapolis is that that's an area that has a significant concentration of Black people and people of color. And right. It's changing, and the potential for complete displacement exists right. if we don't pay attention.
Absolutely.
And, I think maybe just the idea of yes, there, every major city has some combination, has its own demographics and whatnot. But I would think that some of the work that's being done in Memphis is appropriate. And the part we really haven't talked about as much here is the role of foundations and other philanthropy in supporting the work. It's these riverfronts, waterfronts aren't built, park systems aren't built entirely on the tax base. And so the idea of the Minneapolis Foundation or somebody else coming forward as a major supporter is a dimension that should be explored. I think, in fact, so the reason I mentioned Memphis is that the Kresge Foundation has been very active in that area, and the community itself has become fairly expert in terms of understanding the frankly the hydrology and dynamic, how the river functions there, and then building up in layers in terms of what's the green infrastructure, what's the economic development, all those points Julia said that we have, there's probably 10 categories there. And what we try to do is bring best examples in each of those 10 categories as a starting point for a conversation locally.
So what was Kresge Foundation's interest? What motivated them to be an investor leader in that?
I think I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to remember her name offhand, but there was a woman who organized a local organization like a Friends of the River or some such notion like that, and approached them from a grant making point of view, which we are a small organization focused on the academic portion of engagement, but the St. Paul Riverfront Corporation in St. Paul for many years had the support of McKnight Foundation for the work there. And there are numbers like in the downtown area of St. Paul, there was $100 million of public realm investment, parks, et cetera. And it spurred over $1 billion of private investment. As soon as you say that, you say, well, who is the development for? And you have the issues of gentrification that come immediately, have to be on the table. And you can look at Heritage Park, for example, and say how well did that fairly large project play out, right? And so there's
tell me your assessment of that. That's interesting. Tell me about that. What's the industry saying in assessing whether Heritage Park?
There you go. That's a fair question. I mean, I'm not a North Minneapolis resident. I do know there was a lot of those projects have a lot of disruption in building them, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you just look at the road construction schedule that's coming up, and so the idea of displacing community to build community is kind of a tough concept, right? I mean, there's a lot of disruption that goes on over time to build something that scale, and so I think the idea of doing development projects that fit into the neighborhood and have and frankly, part of it is having black developers involved in the projects as opposed to people from not in the area, and it's complicated. I mean, I think I would defer to my colleague Jamil on that mm-hmm. front, just looking at what the what the business environment, the development environment is.
But we do know that a lot of promises weren't kept.
Right. And then also I personally am a big proponent of the public realm development and the institutional development. That's a different dynamic. But back to my point about having the financial resources from the foundations to be thoughtful about that, and St. Paul used to do politically incorrectly named eventually the Millard Fillmore dinner. I mean, the thing you have to be careful of when you pick a theme is what the history of it is, and then you wind up with egg on your face and have to
Calhoun Square,
right,
Calhoun Boulevard,
you know,
and all those things
it's
associated
so
with.
thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. This is, I'm sure, hopefully I'm at least pointing in the right direction. I don't know if each step is on the way, but the idea, you know, in St. Paul they used to do an annual dinner to celebrate the accomplishments and look forward to what's next, and also to measure progress. And that's another dimension that the Design Center does, is that we're starting to use the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Julie and I have been talking a little bit about it, but to measure impact of development against those metrics that are really international. So there's a lot, there's a lot going on, and we're trying not to overcomplicate it, but we really want to invite folks to be involved in this liaison group to help us explore it.
And we're hoping that the Hawthorne Area Council will maybe have a representative on our research team. Would be very good, because as we're developing the curriculum and so on, to have someone from the neighborhood would be very helpful.
I was trying to look for a book that you made me think about, and I quoted from it often, and it's by a historian who talked about the history of racism in Minnesota in particular, and what he does is clearly spell out that public policy, private enterprise, and the culture all collaborated, not on a one-of or every now and then basis, but in a way that was systemic and and broad and deep, to exclude and depress Black development, Black emergence, Black success in this marketplace. And so that's why I think this conversation is so important, because we still are living with the, even if there's not a memory of the intent, the practice itself, how brilliant the practice was to have exclusion continue without a reason, because it's the way things were, and nobody held accountable for it, right? And I think what has to happen is discussions like this that look at specific instances and laws and deals and outcomes that taken together reveal pattern, practice, and intent, and that intent has been a contradiction to the expressed values of democracy and of community. And the intent reflects a deep-seated commitment to an unspoken commitment to white supremacy that guided the expansion of Europeans across North America, that allowed people to disregard their systems and processes for appropriating the land from its previous inhabitors, right? And allowed them to rationalize the theft of labor and life of African people that were enslaved. And so until we begin to continue and expand those conversations, I think we are continuing a folly, and it's easy to continue the folly because the folly works so far. But the question is it sustainable? And at some point,
the answer is no.
The answer is no. And at some point in time, we have to pay the piper, pay the bill, repair that which was damaged, and the reckoning, the notion of reckoning, I think, is real. So, as you're talking about corporate or philanthropic, I'm not sure why the idea popped up, but how does something like Gold Medal Park emerge over on the south end of the river, versus the North Loop? But is that a General Mills funded or a privately funded oasis there? or what. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, the Gold Medal Park next to the Guthrie, but I'm curious about it. I can't remember. I read it. I know the answer, but tell me what you know about it.
I know that it was one of the people involved in the healthcare industry funded it. I forget the gentleman's name. I should know, but I don't. But it was a private park, and there's just the city commission and how that that won't be there for perpetuity. It's still is privately owned. You go back. As you were turning around looking in your bookcase, it reminds me that one of the projects that the Design Center is involved in is the mapping prejudice project, and so the International Geodesign Collaboration is using that historic GIS mapping to uncover covenants and patterns and those all those the points that you were making. In fact, I think if you look into the restrictions and covenants, and I believe there were actually covenants in Golden Valley near the end of Worth Parkway. And so, even the idea of a public art project that interprets, just tells the story, both, virtually like this, we use QR codes and things now, but I would imagine that's going to be a big part of this conversation.
Let me give you a personal story, a story that personalizes what we're talking about here. Brenda, you'll help me. Brenda and I were in kindergarten together in Kansas City. We're both 74, 75 now. So we've been around a long time. And we grew up in a black neighborhood that was that was changing. There was white flight in the kindergarten we went to before they allowed blacks in. The whites who were leaving torched it. So we had to go to another school. We had kindergarten in a dance hall, a saloon, on that they mopped up every night, but still smelled like alcohol because it was a dance hall. And so then the next year they restored the building. We moved in and had a great, first, second, primary school. But I live near Worth Park. I live just 5 doors south of Plymouth Avenue. When I first came to Minneapolis, maybe in 67 or 8 or so, my brother had a friend that he wanted to meet. He was younger than me, who he thought lived on Plymouth Avenue. And we were driving one early evening in the summertime west on Plymouth Avenue, and went from west of Penn towards Xerxes, the bottom of the hill. And so we get around this little corner, Brenda, there's a little corner. When you turn this little corner, there's a slight bend to the right. You see this big chalet on a hill, stone, big, huge, and all this green and all this wooded. And so I go to panic immediately because it tells me, first of all, said, panic, white neighborhood, white people. And they're going to ask me what I'm doing here. And my brother and I are in danger now because we're past the black community. We're in the white neighborhood. Brenda reminded me of driving out 39th Street or Main Street over towards Holmes or what's the neighbor? I can't remember the neighbor. Overland Park.
Yeah, and Ward Parkway.
Yeah, Ward Parkway.
And Ward Parkway and the Plaza.
So Julia and Tim, I'm sort of telling you that here is the personification, the personal story that reflects how deep and I can't think of the right words for it, but how much impact there is where it's not even thinking at that point. It's always a question of your body telling you that you're in danger because, and not that I knew anybody, didn't see anybody, I knew it was time to be extra careful because anything could happen. And anything that I feared was getting arrested or killed for no other reason than being black in that neighborhood. And it wasn't the case. I just didn't know.
Right.
I just didn't know, but my instinct told me to react that way. So we got a lot of problems. And so, and then that reminds me, this is one last thing. I had a kid with me one day his parents were asking my wife and I to keep the kid. Kid was a little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and I'm driving 4 blocks from where I live now, where I'm sitting now, on Penn Avenue, and a squad car pulls up behind me, just daily traffic. I got no problem with that, but the kid sees the cop and he goes stiff and starts whispering to me, "Cops are behind us." So I'm saying, at 8 years old, you're having this physical reaction, and his was no different from mine at 20, where
Right.
he thought a
Right.
cop pulling up behind could mean something that was dangerous. So anyway,
And
got
we
a lot to
haven't
work with,
forgotten that
work out.
trauma after so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well, you know,
listen,
that raises a lot of question about park design, like who are those for? You know, who are they building the parks for? And also that parks aren't always seen as a safe place. So,
right.
you know, the park it's a beautiful design of the park off of Broadway, but there have been issues with ownership, really crime and ownership of that, and so I think that's been one of the sobering parts of certainly last semester. It's not a long period of time, but the predominantly white students' perception of what they're seeing and experiencing on the ground doesn't include what you just described in terms of being worried about the police, and it's even as you've heard the anecdote of two little black kids watching the city plant trees, and they say, "Oh, those aren't for us. By the time they're built, we won't be here." So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's but I think that so listening listening to the stories is hard. Living them is harder. So I think that's so we'll have 12 more students that go through this experience and probably have a changed perspective after it, and do that over a period of time, and see where that goes.
This has been a wonderful hour, wonderful conversation. Thank you both for what you're doing, for the work, and for sharing it here. But let me close with Julia, you and Tim inviting people to sign up, show up, participate, exercise ownership and equity in the future of our community, especially the project on 26th.
So we'll have the co-design events on October 1st, Saturday, October 1st, and Saturday, October 15th. And we hope everyone will come to that, at least do that.
Okay. All right. Great. Tim, any final invitations or instructions?
Just thank you for the opportunity, and we will have a reading list that we will share. I mean, I think, and we started compiling it last year with some of our colleagues, and we'd like to continue our community interviews, reach out to you all, and make that one of the beautiful things about Google Docs is that people can edit it, so we can make it a wiki project. So, and we'd love to come back and share the stories. And if you're around for the events and would consider covering them, or however you do the outreach and whatnot, we'd love to have you as part of the liaison team. So
maybe we could do a live stream of one of the classes.
Yeah, for sure.
And do it as one of our programs. I'd love to see the process where the students and community people are engaging you and the design center and the university. Listen, thank you so much. Diane, any final comments? Dee, Brenda?
This has been a great show, and thank you both, Julia and Tim. And Julia, I will be in touch with you.
Excellent, Diana. So nice to meet you.
Brenda, any comments or thoughts?
I just think, as an educator, what an alternative to educating. It's not the traditional classic. It's, I've just been reading the Hersinger report, and they're talking about the last 2 years of high school blending into the first 2 years of college, where it's careers and industry. And I just think, and I thought about that when you were talking, because we have to do things different. And you just presented a great plan for young people to be involved in the city that they're living in. So
we're
kudos
excited about it too. And we do see it's a way of learning by doing things.
It is. It's great.
Dee, any thoughts or feedback?
Hi, Dee.
Listen, well, thank you so much for being here, and our doors are open. Please come back as often as you wish. We'd love to have this important conversation again and again and again. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Nice meeting you both.
Nice to meet you. Yeah,